We take a little jump over the page to Stanley and Mitch's entry onto the scene. It says, two men come around the corner, Stanley Kowalski and Mitch. They're about 28 or 30 years old, roughly dressed in blue denim work clothes. Stanley carries his bowling jacket and a red-stained package from a butcher's. So again, we've got this symbolic property to these stage directions. The fact that Stanley is roughly dressed in blue denim work clothes. Williams uses clothing here and costume as a symbol of both Stanley's class status and his sort of rugged materialism. He is involved in the industrial economy. He is a labourer, and the fact that he wears work clothes means that he is symbolised by his actual labour, which is completely distinctive from the background that Stella and Blanche are from. He carries his bowling jacket in a red stained package from the butcher's. Now we've got a number of different things being used here. Again, the descriptions of him and the items that he carries is actually a portion of meat that he's got in his hand. Again, borrow that kind of vivid colour intensity that we see in the opening stage directions that's associated in the play with sensory divergence and sensual intensity, and that becomes the context that is too much for Blanche. But importantly also, this meat that he's carrying gives us a sort of metaphorical representation of Stanley returning home from a hunt. You know, it's important in its construction of his identity as a sort of vital alpha male. By vital, I mean, you know, full of life, full of vital energy. That is the reason both for his kind of compelling sexual attractiveness and also the reason why Blanche finds him so threatening. So we see this sort of sexual attraction there. A little further down the page, he says, bellowing, "Hey there, Stella, baby!" He's got this kind of aggressive ruggedness that's both primal and violent, but also, as we see further through the play, both compelling and attractive to both Stella and Blanche. There's a lot of sexual tension in the dialogue between Blanche and Stanley, and this sort of virile, vital primitivism that he embodies is precisely the embodiment of that virile, rugged materialism that America's economy was starting to structure itself around and become the kind of world leader in. So he represents a kind of new America that Blanche is at odds with and threatened by. We're told that Stella comes out on the first floor landing, a gentle young woman about 25 and of a background quite different from her husband. So immediately Williams wants to make it explicit that they're from very different socioeconomic and class backgrounds. So that, you know, we know that his denim clothes, for example, and his tossing meat around are not throwaway descriptions there, that they carry symbolic currency in the opening of the play. Stella, again, contrast with him in this dialogue. Stella mildly expresses herself. "Don't holler at me like that. Hi, Mitch." You know, she remembers to be polite, and she asks him not to yell. Stanley simply says, "Catch what? Meat." You know, he's got this incredibly blunt dialogue that captures his primitivism and clearly defines her passive role. You know, he is there to get the meat, to bring it back home, and to just sort of launch it at her. She can worry about the cooking and the politeness and the niceties of social interaction. Again, the stage directions carry this lyrical quality. He heaves the package at her, doesn't throw it out, he heaves it at her. It's got this suggestion of effort and of exhaustion that carries a kind of sexual connotation. She cries out in protest but manages to catch it, then she laughs breathlessly. So there's this kind of sudden flirtatious shifting from crying out in protest to sudden laughter. That is the hallmark of, you know, someone almost being hot under the collar and blown away by someone's kind of rugged, vital sexuality. So clearly what we are given a picture of here is this sexual dynamism and his sort of alpha male role that he adopts in the play. Her husband and his companion have already started back around the corner, so there's a sort of dismissive presumption about this. I'm just going to launch the meat at my wife, say 2 words, catch meat, and then wander off without even, responding to her dialogue. There's something extremely crass and dismissive about these stage directions that reveal the privileged role of men in this play. Her dependence on him is furthered in this description. She calls after him, "Stanley, where are you going?" Again, another one-word answer, "Bowling. Can I come watch?" Stanley, again, there's a non-affirmative answer to this that shows his kind of magnetism. He just says, "Come on." He knows that Stella is deeply drawn to him, and he possesses this kind of sexual magnetism that involves women kind of gravitating towards him in spite of his roughness and his crude, blunt physicality. A little further over, it's not just, we see that it's not just Stella who experiences these reactions to Stanley, it's all of the women. Negro woman says, "What was that package he threw at her?" She rises from the steps laughing louder. Eunice says, "You hush now." Negro woman says, "Catch what?" There's a sense of salacious, saucy, sexual gossip about the way that they interact here. They're all kind of giggling at him and finding it compelling and being drawn to his motives. That reveals again his sexual magnetism, that we know that all of these women are in some way finding Stanley compelling. So what we're being given before Blanche's arrival is the setting that we know she is going to find overwhelming and too dynamic and too threatening and too different. And then a man that embodies all of that dynamism and vitality, that possesses raw sexual magnetism. And we know that she's been attracted on this, or driven on this journey by desire, the metaphorical streetcar called desire. Her fate has been driven by it. So there is already a sense of predetermined fate that links this to Greek tragedy and connects to one of Stanley's final lines where he said, "We had this date from the beginning," after he rapes her later on in the play. So we have Blanche's entry. She enters into this scene of laughter. And I think there's a deliberate juxtaposition here of the Negro woman and Eunice continuing to laugh, and then Blanche coming round the corner. We've got this action between races that signifies friendly sort of exchange, and then the individual who is likely to find this context completely alien and threatening in some fashion. She comes around the corner carrying a valise. It's a French trunk. She's not just carrying a suitcase or a trunk, she's carrying a valise, which again hints at that kind of aristocratic heritage that in this region of America has connections to French nationality, which is where her surname Dubois comes from. She looks at a slip of paper, then at the building, then again at the slip, and again at the building. What we've got here in this direction is her incomprehension of the scene itself and the surroundings. She can't understand the scene itself and the surroundings in this particular moment, and that's what we see through this continual shifting backwards and forwards between the address and the building. She's in utter disbelief that her noble sister of aristocratic heritage almost. Aristocracy doesn't exist in America, but there is a sense of being attached to the moneyed class and nobility that means that this is incomprehensible to her. This sort of rough and ready urban scene that their apartment clearly is situated within. She cannot believe this. And again, Williams sort of takes away the implication of this by revealing it explicitly. Her expression is one of shocked disbelief that, again, she's stunned by the difference in the surroundings. Her appearance is incongruous to this setting. So again, we're going back to that kind of fish out of water motif that we see constantly when Blanche is concerned. She's just absolutely alien to this environment, and even her clothing is at odds with this setting. She's daintily dressed. We've got someone like Stanley wearing rugged denim, and here Blanche is daintily dressed in a white suit with a fluffy bodice, necklace and earrings of pearl, white gloves and hat, looking as if she were arriving at a summer tea or cocktail party in the Garden District. So this kind of elaborate clothing, none of it functional, She's wearing a suit and she doesn't work. She's wearing a fluffy bodice that has no practical application whatsoever, and her jewellery, again, suggests that she's attending some kind of party rather than wearing clothes for a specific reason, particularly for one of labour. That actually is attached to a specific geographic location in the city, the Garden District, in the suburbs where rich people live. Important also is the whiteness of this clothing, this sense of not only of nobility, but of actually what we go on to find out is a mistaken or deceptive pretense of innocence. That we see a kind of physical parallel here in her appearance. She's about 5 years older than Stella. Her delicate beauty must avoid a strong light. There is something about her uncertain, as well as her white clothes, that suggests a moth. Now, if we think of the sensory intensity of the descriptions that Williams has used so far to depict the scene and to depict Stanley and to depict the surroundings, we've got someone that must avoid a strong light. We've got to avoid intense sensory stimuli, I guess. And at this moment in time, she seems frail. She seems also inauthentic, and that she's trying to evade reality. And this motif is continued through the play, the light and dark motif that continues throughout the scene and is focused often around the naked lamp bulb in the apartment that Blanche continually tries to surround with a Japanese lantern. And that light is the kind of glaring intensity of reality that is simply too much for her and her outmoded orthodoxy that she represents. And that her uncertain manner, as well as her white clothes, suggests a moth. Now, of course, there's a metaphorical irony at work here, that there is this intense light and sensory vitality and by extension, sexual vitality embodied in Stanley that's represented by that light of reality. And of course, moths are compelled and attracted to these lights, even though she needs to avoid them. So we have this tragic dilemma metaphorically captured in Blanche's character here, that she is compelled and attracted to that which actually destroys her because of her fragility. So again, we see these moments of really lyrical, symbolic stage direction and setting that carry huge symbolic connotations and connect to the central thematic concerns of the play and its central tensions that create its drama.